The Fund AI Pod is a weekly podcast and video about AI usage in the asset management and funds industry. Each episode interviews a funds professional to learn how they are using AI today in real, practical industry examples. We hope to inspire others in the industry to increase their AI adoption. This episode is powered by our sponsor Zentia, making AI real, useful, and enterprise ready. And now for our main episode. I'm your host, Ian Carey, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Diana Dinnis, VP of Product at Bunch, a Berlin-based fund administrator established in 2021. Diana, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
Well, why don't we start off with introducing yourself to the audience and telling a little bit about your career background.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Diana or Diana. I have worked with software engineers for the better part of 20 years. In the last 10, I've worked in cross-functional products teams, which is to say that we've got engineers, designers, sometimes data scientists or analysts helping us to build interesting software products to serve customers. The last 8 years I've done mostly fintech, and it's been primarily in merchant services, but also international payments. So cross-border FX. I've had to touch, of course, AML, KYC, fraud prevention, accounting, invoicing, all the things that kind of end up attached to these things. I've worked for a few unicorns now. So I've worked for 3 unicorns, two of them fintech. One is Molly, based out of the Netherlands, and they were I was there for their B round and their C round when we became a unicorn. They do payments across Europe for small to medium-sized merchants. And then I was at Mambu, where they did core banking. I was there for about a year. It was super interesting, but I think at the end it was just not for me. And eventually I moved to remote.com, where I was looking after about 14 teams just to move money, just to deal with payments, invoicing, compliance around these things, all the red tape that needs to be taken care of. And I'm recently moved to Bunch. I've been here for about 6.5, 7 months now. So I'm new to private markets, but not new to, let's say, the fintech or financial space. I'm also based out of Porto, Portugal at the moment, but I'm traveling to Berlin and to London. I imagine at some point I will be in Luxembourg.
Excellent. All right. And so you touched on joining Bunch earlier this year. Why don't we start with who is Bunch, what do they do, and who are their clients?
Yeah, sure. So Bunch is a fund administration platform. So we're taking technology and then building a service layer around it as well. So we serve primarily fund managers and mostly in Germany and the UK. And we're trying to offer an end-to-end solution, particularly for mid and back office, to try and modernize fund administration, essentially. We do also interact with investors to an extent, right? So, of course, we have notifications, we have a little bit of a portal for them, but our primary customer, let's say, is fund managers.
Excellent. And just for our audience who may not know, what exactly does a fund administrator do?
Well, I think our funders would say that they make deals, and essentially they basically raise a lot of money, find target companies or portfolio companies, go and invest money in them to try and gain a return. And they have to handle everything between all the legal setup of these things. So might have multiple entities, the contracts between the investors and the fund itself, the administration from collecting the initial capital from the investors to deploying it, and then eventually, ideally, right, giving back their ROI. So when they've made the investment, they've made a return, getting that money back, and kind of everything between. Also helping with making sure that everything's compliant, everything's above board, making sure that everybody's been KYB'd and KYC'd, etc. So it can be a really big job, and sometimes a fund administration has a whole team doing this. Sometimes it's just an individual. Really depends on the size. We have worked with very small funds, and we're now kind of going further and further up market, where you're talking about 100 million versus like 50 million euro kind of scenarios.
And another key part's obviously providing a NAV or an independent valuation to the investors so that they know how their investment's going, investment in those funds, correct?
Indeed, that's a typical quarterly report where they're calculating how the investment is doing. And most investments tend to be about 10 years in total they're aiming for.
From a Bunch perspective, what was the gap in the market that the founders saw that they looked to create a new fund administrator targeting this space?
I think they both just worked in this space, and you can see their interest in technology from the moment you meet them. And I think they just saw that a lot of this stuff is just literally still done on spreadsheets, and it's not particularly efficient. And there is a lot of, I think funds would say that they're all very special and all very different, but in reality, a lot of what they do is repetitive. A lot of it is the same thing over and over again, and the technology has just not been built out. So I think they just saw an opening. I think that there was enough interest and there is growing interest in this that they thought this is the right time. This is the tipping point to kind of get involved with this space. And I think that's what drove them to start Bunch.
Am I correct in saying that Bunch is focused on the alternatives, so the private markets?
Yes.
Good, because having worked in the fund administration space for 15 years myself, I'd say that what I definitely saw was the traditional side definitely had some more automation because equities, listed very simple. Whereas you saw across the industry, the alternatives was lagging in terms of the investment and a lot more manual processes, a lot of PDFs, even faxes. I would kind of reiterate or support that it was ripe for technology to come in and bring it up to market where it needs to be.
I don't think I've heard the word fax in quite a while.
Okay, so you are VP of product. Tell us, what does that day to day look like? What does that involve, especially when you are talking about a fast moving technology based startup?
I think it changes by phase, but I think we're in the growth phase right now. We're picking up quite a lot of customers, and the challenge at the moment is kind of just scaling. And so part of what I'm doing a lot right now is thinking about how do we structure ourselves so we don't break, right? Both from a technical and from a human being point of view. There's a lot of time spent hiring. There's a lot of time spent talking to customers and people in the industry. And this might be partially because I don't come from the industry, so there's a bit of a learning curve for me. But also, it's just consistently doing this is helpful to gain insights and to understand customers' pain points and the opportunities that they are also being fed, the things that they can maybe capitalize on further. So, no 2 days are quite the same. But yeah, I mean, I'll be talking to customers. I'll be working with our operations team, looking at automation gaps, digging into usability of our product. I think every 2 weeks we're constantly realigning with the founders to make sure we're on the same page in terms of strategy because we want to be as effective and efficient with our resources as a Series A as humanly possible. So no 2 days are quite the same, which is kind of why this space is quite fun, actually.
Excellent. And actually, that was sort of something I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into is you're in the growth phase and you've got limited capital. You've got to think about your capital allocation. How do you balance between we need to look at our resources, our FT, our capital and product development in scaling what we have and adding clients to the existing and supporting that versus building new product to expand the market that we can go after?
Yeah, so Bunch is uniquely positioned in the sense that I think they built up a decent sized operations team. And so to a certain extent, we can solidify and extend the product where we absolutely know is it's needed. Like I we're filling a roadmap for next year and it's not exactly hard. It's really easy. We know exactly what needs to be built and what pretty much every fund and fund admin will need, fund manager will need. And we're kind of supplementing with operational specialized staff. So we've got, I think, at least half a dozen, if not more, fund accountants upstairs at the moment, and we're still actively hiring. And so things that might be not quite ready for the roadmap can be taken care of by our service team at the moment. And as we learn, we can kind of essentially catch up or constantly be on the heels of what they're putting together, essentially.
With fund administration historically being a little bit more manual than, say, a payments provider or your previous fintech experiences, I guess what was your initial impression coming in first time working at a fund administrator in terms of just where the automation level was relative to other fintechs?
Relative to the fintechs, for me personally, it was really shocking the amount of things that are still done manually. And in particular with things that just don't make sense to be in a spreadsheet. Like I think people try and maintain a ledger in a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet is not a great place to maintain a ledger to understand transactions for double bookkeeping, double entry bookkeeping, for instance. So I'm surprised that more hasn't been built already. I can see the wave coming. I can see the different competitors in the US, but also here in Europe, trying to tackle these problems. And a lot of the problems are many are very unique or customized, but there are quite a few that are it's the same stuff over and over again, and it's just someone hasn't taken the time to go ahead and take a bit of tech and just tackle it essentially. So it was really very surprising, and the amount that we're able to automate is quite a lot at the moment, to be honest.
Well, excellent. That leads me to my next question then is how are you using AI and even just general automation tools at Bunch today?
So AI, I think, can use it in lots of different ways. I think let's start with like the premise of. Uh, and funny enough, I think I read an article. I think, in fact, yesterday it might have been Friday, about the state of kind of private markets. And one of the things that they were talking about is like the use of tech. But the problem that people are constantly running into with AI is that the data is a mess. And so for me, it's three layers. We need the first layer, which is the data layer. We need the second layer, which is like the governance or the policies, or essentially the rules around what you can change, when you can change it, who can change it, etc. And then you got the third part, which is like layering on the AI. I suppose the two pieces of AI that we're looking into heavily, one that we use quite a lot is extraction, because LLMs are really good at extracting data. They're not perfect, so you kind of need to have the human in the loop, right? You need the ability to like extract the stuff and then basically have one side that says, here's the document, here's the data we pulled, and be able to kind of do a quick comparison, right? And that will save literally hundreds of hours over time. So the extraction of data and kind of getting deal terms, what's the carry, what's the hurdle, all these things, pull them appropriately, looking at management fees, etc. It's super handy to use AI to pull data from documents and to help to structure it and then stick into a database. And the one that now has become really hot only in the last probably month is the use of agents, right? But if you want to use agents, you have to get good data and you have to have good governance, because if you don't have those, these agents will not be deterministic. And if they're not deterministic, you don't understand what they've done and why they've done it. You need to be having some sort of predictability in what they actually do. And I think for a while, what will happen is you will have the human in the loop. And as you build kind of more governance, more policies around it, you'll have much more autonomous agents. So it's something we're already looking into. We're looking at use cases where it actually might be helpful. I think the other thing is that people need to work out, where does it make sense to use an agent? It's like, I think with most new tech, I think of AI as just another piece of tech. Super powerful, incredible, revolutionary tech, absolutely. But the question becomes, where is it best used? Because if it's a simple workflow that never changes, there's no point in putting in AI, right? Just build it once and get on with it. And so I think it's going to be figuring out, where's the good use of it from an ROI point of view. Where if I put money into this from building and developing this with the engineers, that I'm actually going to get um, some real return on investment and scaling and assistance and speed and the rest of it. For us, the big thing right today is extraction and categorization of data. So we can have a clean data layer, because then everything else will be built on that. How capital calls are done, what percentage is management fee, when can it be called, if there's a schedule, if there's not, if there's a certain percentage can be called in a certain amount of time. All of these things need to be kind of known before we can, let's say, use AI to automate that. If it's standard workflows, we could just use quote unquote traditional tech, right? That scales very well without an issue.
And on the data extraction, Word documents, Excel, for something like PDFs, are you using some OCR technology? How are you extracting and reading PDFs if you are ingesting that sort of document?
So we use V7 in particular. It's pretty decent software. We're also looking into using, actually, we just spoke yesterday to some other AI companies that specialize in RAG and the setup of it and the extraction in specific ways. And some of them also allow us to use their models to learn over time, right? But we actually then have control of like how it's learning, what it's picking up, etc. So right now, I think we're using primarily V7. We're looking into other things. I think everybody has either a Claude or a ChatGPT license, one or the other. I think some of the staff internally have both. And what's happening is like over time, we're starting to build standardized prompts that people can just use and reuse and reuse. So it's kind of right now it's a mix of tech and human beings. In other cases, we've actually built V7 into specific workflows, and we'll actually extract looking for specific things. For instance, like an LPA, we have obviously a setup just to extract from LPAs. Things like KPIs, for instance, on portfolio companies, everybody does it uniquely. And so it's a bit trickier. I think over time we're going to get much better at it. Sometimes people put it in spreadsheets. Sometimes it's coming in emails because often they're chasing founders or potentially their finance staff to pull these numbers, right? These KPIs that get sent across. And so it's wildly varied right now, at least.
And just curious, from your experience, are the AI tools smart enough? Different LPAs may have different structures. Does it need to get trained on the different structures before it can then extract it? Or they're smart enough now that you can have a new document, new structure, it already knows the terms, where to look for, what to pull, etc.
They're getting smarter. They're definitely getting smarter. Um, I would say probably 80% of the time it's getting it right. Where I think 6 months ago when I got here, it could be as low as 50. So it is getting better. And I think the other thing is like, I hate to say this, there's only so many lawyers that work in funds. So over time, there is a bit of a pattern that we're starting to recognize and then starting to correct to make that extraction slicker and quicker and easier.
You touched on there, so obviously not quite 100%. Human in the loop, but very important from governance and oversight. So what does that look like at Bunch? How does that work in reality?
So for instance, we'll get an LPA, we'll pop it into our tool. The tool will extract the data. It'll have, let's say, 20 data points. And what we'll do is so these are the 20 data points that we have. This is the length. This is the management fee. This is the hurdle. This is X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be. And we'll basically say, okay, this is where we pulled it from. And so simply by having on one side, you'll have, trying to describe this. So one side, you'll have like a list of, let's say, the data points, the key data points about how we run the fund. And on the right, you might have the document. And as you kind of like click through the data points, it will pull on the right side where it's extracted that from the document. So you can see the context of the LPA as to where it's come from. It will also maybe pull out specific paragraphs or places where it's like this is key information to have read to understand how something operates. And it's essentially checked, right? And at some point, occasionally if something is if we have a suspicion that this does not work very well, we do have solicitors in house, of course, that will actually check the agreement. But most of the time, it works decently enough that we can actually get around that. And we do maybe a short confirmation with the fund admin and say, hey, based on this is what we believe it to be. And they can say, yep, no problem. And we kind of move on from there.
How are your clients exposed to the AI tools, or are these currently more internally for your own workflows at this stage?
Today, they're more internal. I think over time, we would like to expose them. I think the funny thing is I'd rather use our operations team to experiment on a little bit, just because it's so new and there's so little tech in this space. If they can do it really, really simply, then we can start to expose that to our customers at the end of the day. Even with AI agents, we're thinking of experimenting with more complicated cases that are a bit more ambitious, because if we can get it right once internally, then exposing the AI agent to a customer should be much easier because it'll be a subset of things that they could do.
The industry is quoting 2025 as the year of the agent. So I think it's going to be a fascinating space. You mentioned you've started to look at it. Do you have a vision of how that could work? Because I've heard stories of obviously an agent for every task. So you could have a reconciliation agent, an LPA agent, a distribution agent, and then obviously an agent that manages the agents. How have you started to think about agentic AI within Bunch?
Do you recall Clippy, Ian?
Yes.
So completely useless, not particularly helpful. All right. And I think we're thinking in the sense that like we'll have an AI that essentially follows you around the platform. I think for a very long time, AI will have a split face in the sense that you'll still have interfaces and you'll have then the ability then to chat to a bot, right? And I think we're thinking about it at the moment in this way, where you might need a little bit of assistance to do a task. So, funny enough, we actually put together on last Friday at our town hall something conceptually to kind of get across to our staff what this might look like or how it could look like. So we basically use the example of a capital call. Super common. These happen all the time. It's a standard kind of almost thing to an extent, right? And so we essentially showed them our typical capital call screen. And in the right hand corner, we had a bit of an AI agent, little thing there. They opened it up. And essentially, what the person was able to do is say, hey, I want to create a capital call. The bot would literally talk back to them, say, great, I see that you're on fund A's page. Do you want to do a capital call for that fund? So, context aware, starting for that. And then kind of almost having a conversational workflow saying, well, how much do you want to call? It would basically say, great, you want to call this much. Based on the terms, you can only call this on this date. Is this date okay? Come back and say, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Is there anybody that you want to exclude? Are there any special note, anything special that you want to put in the notice, etc.? Would generate a draft. And then on the page of capital calls, it'd have the draft. And if you want to click into the draft, you could pull the draft up, you could see it. You could download the Excel that's either in the draft, but also provided by the AI bot agent, and have a bit more of a back and forth, as if you were speaking with somebody that's actually going to create a capital call. Now, in reality, you could probably just do this as a normal, typical interface. So all of these rules and regulations around what your capital call might be would be that. But it's maybe a bit more natural to say, I want this, have something affirm, going back and forth, kind of in a feedback loop. So really, the human is in the loop. But we did this demo. It took 5 minutes, then create a capital call, right? And it had all the information at hand, and it created everything that the person would have needed, right? So I think it will be a mix for a while. I think some things will just completely disappear. You'll like never see them. Like it'll just happen because the AI bot has done it. So you set off one action, and then the chain reaction of like 8, 10, 12 tasks, including some decisions, happen in the background.
Would you say on that, though, that's probably going to be the more low risk, highly repeatable, highly standardized processes that you can kind of trust to almost work every single time? You've obviously got an audit trail, etc.
Yeah, exactly. And so the audit trail is going to be the key bit, right? To show what happened, why it happened, when it happened.
You mentioned Claude, a few others. What AI tools are your team using today across the spectrum?
I think primarily our tech team uses Copilot, uses Claude, ChatGPT is used regularly, V7 is used regularly. We use V0, which is for prototyping and for design. The designers also use Lovable. The PMs also use Lovable. So in place of like traditional PRDs, I don't really want PRDs anymore. Like I want you to frame the problem, but I'd rather you just prototype it out or just show, like build essentially, rather than write lengthy documentation. I've never enjoyed like lengthy documentation anyways. Like a 2-pager for me is good. But instead of like writing things out, I think we're just kind of vibe coding more.
I love that. We're starting to hear more and more of people saying, look, if you want a feature, you've got to vibe code it yourself. It forces everyone to learn a little bit about coding, get used to the tools, visualize it, test it, and then obviously if that gets approved, you spec it out properly, fully. But I love to hear that that's what you guys are doing there as well.
I think it's amazing for just getting ideas out there and to validate things very, very quickly. Whereas before it would take a bit more time. Like I think it took me and Brian, I don't know, half a day to build this demo out for showing an agent how they might work with a capital call. Now it's all smoke and mirrors, but it's very effective in terms of getting a point across.
And it helps just get the buy-in, visualize it, and see it, right?
Yeah.
100%. From an engineer perspective as well, are you using GitHub Copilot, tools like that?
Yeah. So the engineers use GitHub Copilot and Claude. I think some of them use ChatGPT, but most of them, I think Claude Code is apparently very good. I actually have it installed on my Visual Studio. I have to at some point go and have a play.
Now, always curious, having worked probably with engineers a lot in your fintech days, have you seen, in speaking with them pre-ChatGPT versus today, what impact that's had on their output? Is it 1.5 times, double the amount they could do with these tools? Do you have a feel or a sense for what impact that's had on productivity or output from an engineer development?
You know what's funny? I don't have a sense of this. And it was funny. I was thinking about it over the weekend to speak to my VP of engineering about this to try and get a sense of it. What I would say is I think it's cut down on. So I think it's probably made them. as effective as everybody else. So I think everyone, even if you're not an engineer, you're probably using AI to make you more efficient. And what I find AI that it does it really well, and I've seen this also when I've been playing a little bit with code with AI, is it basically it's much easier to revise than to create, I think. So starting with a blank page can be very intimidating and takes a little bit of time to like write something out. I don't believe this is any different with an engineer who's coding something, right? So having to write it from scratch is one thing. If you can get it to write the initial code, you're gonna have to check it. It's average at best in my experience, right? It's going to improve, there's no doubt, but it's not brilliant. And so I think they probably have become as efficient as we have, the rest of us using these tools for just different things. And the other thing that I think is no longer what I've noticed is like I don't allow for excuses like I don't know. I don't know is no longer an answer. You have literally the world at your fingertips. Go and ask a chatbot, turn it down to zero hallucination, or check the deep research piece if you're not entirely comfortable with what ChatGPT or Claude or any of the or Grok, whatever is telling you. So I think it allows people to be like a lot more prepared and more effective with their time. I also think in regards to things like quality of code, it can be improved or at least amended to be slightly better in terms of I've never like not writing unit tests is no longer an option. You write the unit test or you get the AI bot to write the unit test. I don't care. That is just something that you can do by default. So there's definitely time saving going on. I think maybe it's just a matter of how much. And I suspect this depends on the individual. I think those of us who are non-technical who have started using it to be more efficient in our own way have learned to do that, right? And I think the engineers that are putting in the effort also are becoming much more efficient because they're making use of AI in the same way. I mean, I have good examples. Like I think one of our engineers recently, he's like, "Oh my god, it took me like 20 minutes to write this algorithm where normally it would take me 3 hours because I was just using the AI to do it with me." And he's like, "I had to then amend it a little bit more, so maybe it was like 30 minutes." So there are time gains for sure.
And would you say that's the biggest benefit is time gains through, I guess, efficiency? Is it time? Is it quality? What would be the biggest benefits you found from the teams using these tools?
I think speed would be the biggest one, right? I think speed by far is the biggest win. Quality, I think, remains to be seen. I think sometimes, and it's probably again, I think I can liken it to when I write a document versus with the AI wrote a document. I actually can spend a fair amount of time adjusting it if it A doesn't have enough context, I haven't provided enough context, or B it's just not there's just not something quite right with it. They do get better over time, right? And again, depending on how much context they have, they can do a better job of it. But speed has been the biggest one.
And just going to the next level there, you might be in a slightly different phase from some large, from some incumbents, but with those benefits, is it you're going to get more output out of your staff or you use some of that time saved for new projects, new initiatives? How do you use that extra time gained at Bunch?
For us right now, it's more about more output. So just being able to do more.
That brings us to looking at the impact of AI on the people. How has Bunch approached AI in terms of when you're hiring staff and then what are you looking for? Is everyone in the firm using it or is it just developers, tech, product side? How do you approach the AI culture at your firm?
Yeah, so everybody uses it. We do have probably every couple weeks at the town hall, kind of, let's say, learning sessions. So we have lunch and learns, and we have kind of like maybe showcases, is probably a better way to put it at town halls. And we're trying to, at least once a month, kind of add some showcases about how somebody internally has used AI for the benefit of their work or for the company or both, right? So we're trying to do constant education, and this happens through formal channels of town hall and learning lunches. But there's also all sorts of stuff that gets shared on Slack. And I think this is across the board. It's not specific to the engineering or the product development or the design space. The other thing is that we look for AI literacy in the interview process. So I'm often asking people, which tools do you use? Which do you use in what scenarios? Do you have a particular favorite and why? And I ask about how they might, integrate them in their day to day work. I think a really interesting one to ask is like, what's a really good prompt that you've used recently or one that you've refined and what did you get out of it? So it's certainly part of the process. It's explicit very much so through the engineering interview process. And at least probably about 3 months ago, we started doing the same thing from the product side for design and product managers.
I love that. I think it's a mandatory requirement now, AI literacy. But also, I think you touched on a very good point. The evolution of AI is just constant and so fast that you need to keep up with your education. And I love the idea of the lunch and learns, the demoing. I think that brings it to life as well for people to see it solving a real life problem that they can relate to as well. We've spoken about what next, or we've spoken about agents. Would you say that is the next focus in terms of applying AI to your workflows, or are there existing tools that you're focused on at the moment or in the near future?
I think, to be honest, the focus right now is making sure the governance and the data layers are correct. And we're looking for specific good opportunities where we can implement agents. So there, to answer your question, is like, it depends, really. So it depends on the situation and what we're trying to do. In some cases, it makes total sense to just go straight to an AI agent. Other times, it's like, well, actually, this is a standard workflow. We just got to build it out. So it will depend. I think over time, as we mature our product, the more mature the product becomes, the more we will have opportunities to make use of AI agents throughout certain types of situations, workflows, et cetera. So it really depends as we broadly kind of start to fulfill more and more and automate more and more.
And curious, even with the chatbots, as certain ones are better for different functions, research, code, etc. Sounds as if you've got a variety of different AI tools that you're using. How do you bring it all together from a governance oversight, see who's using what's been asked? Is there someone overlooking it? Does it aggregate into a dashboard, a tool that can pull it all together?
It's a really good question, and actually, at the moment, we don't have anything strong around that. It's funny enough that you mentioned this because I think about 2 weeks ago, the VP of engineering and I were actually speaking about this. Like, how do we make sure it's being used, not abused, and what people are kind of feeding into these things? There are some specific rules around what you can use and where you can use it. So certain types of sensitive data, of course, can't be used in any sort of public domain, of course. Um, but other than that, we're actually looking at how do we figure this out? Because like so many things, right? Technology is amazing, and I am a spent my entire career in tech, so it's not like I'm not a luddite, shall we say? But I'm also very conscious that it can be misused or abused, right? And I've seen that before in the past. So it's something that we're looking into, to be fair, Ian.
Excellent. Having the speed at which you've seen the tech evolve at Bunch, where do you see fund admin or Bunch in 5 years from now?
I think that over time, what will happen is it will make private markets far more accessible because so much of it can be automated. So I'm hoping that over time, what happens is that the retail investor actually has an opportunity potentially to play in these private markets. And I also hoping that this will just unburden fund managers to do what they want to be doing, which is like going and looking for really interesting investment opportunities. Because this administration stuff is really time consuming. And if you can eliminate even half of that, the amount of time that it frees them up to actually look for better investments, more interesting investments, as well as look for maybe more money to invest to get better returns, to get better growth. I think this is what will be really interesting. And I don't think it'll be unique to Bunch. I think the space that's playing here will help to enable this. So that is quite exciting, actually.
Yeah, there was a nice saying, when you're talking to GPs, investors pay you to be the best investor, not the best reconciler. So the more time you can take that reduces their administration burden, the more time they can do what they're best at.
Exactly.
From a few little personal things, do you use AI in your day-to-day life today? And if so, what would be the biggest kind of use cases?
The biggest kind of use cases. So I was finally, agents I think have rolled out to Portugal this past weekend. I don't. I use it for all sorts of stuff, to be honest, from on a personal space. I have a 6-year-old, and I will use ChatGPT to make up stories with him, and then have the voice mode actually read the story out to him, and he thinks it's hilarious because you can also stop the bot and ask a question, and the bot will literally just make up an answer in relation to where it is in the story, kind of thing. I use it for cooking, for sticking to my diet. And recently, I was actually trying to book a holiday to Cape Verde. And I basically gave it a bunch of parameters and said, hey, can you get me all of these options, Mr. Agent? Thanks very much. And it actually came back with quite a lot of stuff. And I hate doing that kind of stuff. It's just time consuming. And I'm just not, it's headspace that I don't want to spend on things that I would consider exciting and interesting, but maybe banal. Like it's something that just has to be done. I'm looking forward to basically telling a bot to order my groceries and just have it remember my shopping list. So I think it's just adulting, surprisingly admin heavy. And I would love it for AI to just take these things off my to do list. Also, what I use it personally for a lot is learning. So I think that like, I, I feel like, especially if it's something more complex, it's really nice to just go and be like, explain this to me as if I was 5. Okay, now explain it to me as if I was 10. Okay, I'm now going to tell you what my understanding is. Please correct me where I've gotten it wrong or teach me where I've gotten it wrong. So from an education point of view, it's super handy as well. And I've even used it to like learn more about AI. So I'm like, I don't fully understand this concept. Can you break it down for me? And for me, I think this is probably the most interesting use of it from a personal point of view. But the other stuff is just fun. I think there's like some delight elements and there's some time savings that goes with it.
I'd ask you for some advice here for the audience that want to start with AI, but they might be overwhelmed with there's so much out there, and there's how should someone who wants to embrace this, what should be their first couple of steps?
Honestly, I think the first step is just to pick one and start using it. And use it as a bit of a tutor or a coach because I think asking it questions, um, and I would say just be a little bit careful of hallucination. So don't be afraid to like question the AI because it will gaslight you and then it will correct itself. I think I once I don't I mean this is a while ago, probably wouldn't happen now, but it was probably about a year ago, and I had a PM who was just messing around with ChatGPT, and he asked it to give him list him the states of the United States, and it only listed 48. And then it said, "Hey, doesn't the United States have 50 states?" And the chat AI said, "Ah, yes, of course. I'm sorry," and then added 2 additional ones, which I think was Alaska and Hawaii. I guess it was doing continental, U.S. states for whatever reason. But I think actually interacting with it allows you to learn how to use it. And then I think you can just move on to all sorts of resources. The amount of talks about AI and how it works on YouTube, it's amazing how much content has been created so quickly. But I would say just start to use it. That's probably, I mean, I think that's the way I've learned mostly. And then I've just expanded based on what I'm learning, interacting with it, and then expanded to YouTube, online reading materials, and speaking to other people that are using it, right? I've gotten some really interesting tips from colleagues and my husband on occasion about AI.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just start playing. Like you said, it's people get blown away at how powerful it is, but then learning what works, what doesn't, you start to learn about how to prompt better. Then you start to learn about giving more context. Then you can go into which tools better, and you just go down a rabbit hole. But it's just starting, play with it, even in your day to day. Like I'm cooking with XYZ. What's the best way to do this? If you were to have one takeaway from today's episode, what would be the main message there?
That AI is coming for fund administration, I would say.
Okay, Diana. And one question I always ask all my guests is one book or podcast that you would recommend to the audience.
So I'd say Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
What is it about that book that you would recommend?
I think it taught me about life. It sounds really ridiculous. So Marcus Aurelius, for those who don't know, is one of the original Stoics, and I think basically it's just teaching you how to live with or try and live with virtue, and how you deal with adversity in general in life. Uh, and I think it's really helpful to constantly reflect on things that are difficult, things that are easy, and how you work through just about anything to a certain extent. So I always find it really helpful. I often go back to it occasionally, reading through different types of passages.
Diana, thank you very much for your time. Where can people find more about Bunch, and also where can they connect with you on LinkedIn or other socials?
Yeah, sure. And just search for me on LinkedIn. You'll find me straight away. If you want to learn more about Bunch, you can just go to bunch.capital and just check out our website.
Diana, thank you very much for your time spent today. It's been very insightful and a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the first episode of the Fund AI Pod. I'm just getting started on this journey, so if you found it interesting, please subscribe and like to the episode. It really helps the channel grow. And I'd love to hear from you. Please share your feedback, thoughts, and guest recommendations in the comments section. And if you're using AI in the funds industry today and would love to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Please reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. It's Ian Carey, IAINCAREY. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.